Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone, back to the Life Success Legacy Podcast. I'm Mike Crawford. I am not Chris Bay, your normal host. In fact, you'll notice that Mr. Bay is missing. This is actually a very special podcast. I have wrangled the other members of the Life Success Legacy team to do a little non-roast of Chris Bay. And he and his wife are celebrating their anniversary, I believe, and kind of out enjoying some semi off the clock time. And we thought we would take the opportunity to tell everybody our favorite things about Mr. Bay. So I wanted to start by talking with Mike Everett a little bit. You've told this story several times in different capacities, but I think everybody would love to hear kind of the history of how you and Chris, came to be, as well as how you, kind of partnered up moving forward.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. Chris Bay and I, we go back a really long way. It's almost 35 years now. We knew each other when he was a part of a ministry up on campus here, and he and my niece kind of ran the show with this group. And, then all of a sudden years go by and hadn't seen each other. And then out of the clear blue sky, Chris Bay calls me. He said, "Hey, I was talking to one of my dads over at the school, said that I needed to get a hold of this crazy black book called Becoming Your Own Banker and call this guy down in Baldwin City where I lived at the time, Mike Everett." And he goes, "Well, I know Mike Everett." And so long story short, we spent 9.5 months of study with Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And this is before we had software, mind you. I had just learned how to do Excel spreadsheets, and now I don't think I could do them to save my life. But Chris wanted multiple scenarios over this 9.5 month period. And it usually took me somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours to tweak if he wanted one change. And lo and behold, Sean kind of tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I think we ought to do this." Now, this was either, I want to say it was like 2010, 2011, which he ended up becoming a client. It was really one of my very first IBC clients who really took IBC to the level that we do today, by the way. And for about 2 years, we would meet once or twice a year. I'd go over to their house and bore them with IBC stories and projections and spreadsheets and craziness. And then I just randomly, Chris called me and says, "Hey, I need to come out to your house." And so me, not really understanding full customer service, sorry, Shelley, I got out all of his policies. He had 4 policies. And I mean, I had everything spread out on the desk and was just ready for him. And he came in and he started looking at the policies. He says, I'm not really here to discuss IBC. I said, "Really?" I said, "What are you here for?" He says, I'm going to make a career change. I said, "Really?" I said, "What are you going to do?" He goes, "I want to come to work with you." You guys know me well enough. I don't get rattled very often. My jaw dropped. My eyes popped out of my head. And I said, "Really?" I said, "Chris, you've been a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. principal for 13 years. And I said, this is commission sales." And he said, "Yeah." He says, "I've just been," he's dove in so deep into IBC. And, anybody who knows Chris, especially the people who are listening to this podcast today, they know he's a researcher. And he has spent hours upon hours. And I chuckle about this because when I first learned about IBC, I used this as a bedtime story for my wife for the first 2 weeks that I learned about this. I'm just a romantic like that. But Chris said that he was reading information in bed, all the different publications and books and resources that he could get his hands on. While Sean was over here sawing logs, Chris was reading IBC books. And then that's where our story starts, is him coming on. And I don't know how far to take this, but the first 2 or 3 years, this is when I used to go to Nebraska and Iowa and Missouri and Kansas. And we would get a table, we'd have a stack of books, and we'd high five and we'd fist bump doctors and anesthesiologists and dentists at all of these different events. And of course, I was actually talking to Ron Swall yesterday, and I said, this is the craziness of how Chris Bay and I actually work so well together. Somebody has to do some cartwheels. Somebody's got to be the rah-rah guy and get some jazz hands up. I'm the jazz hands guy. And then all of a sudden, as this whole thing developed, Chris Bay, because of his personality, because of how sweet he is, how compassionate he is, we would go to these events and I would get everybody all jacked up. And then all of a sudden it was just like, Chris Bay would then bring his questions and compassion and wanting to find out all of the details. And so that's really how this whole thing started. And of course, since then, we've become business partners, and we laugh so hard. Actually, Chris and I laugh about this now. And I know you guys have laughed about this too. On paper, Mike Everett and Chris Bay do not make any sense whatsoever because of the differences in our personality, because of our makeups, because of how we run everything in our lives. But somehow, some way, God has blessed what we are doing, and it is a ball. And now look at this. Look at the folks here on this here podcast today.
Yeah.
I don't understand it all, but man, am I having fun right now.
Yeah, I think like that story to me is like such a funny thing because it's Chris Bay being Chris Bay and just sort of like interjecting himself in a way that is meaningful and, has a purpose, not just like willy-nilly. Everything was thought through. He had a very clear and vivid vision,
Oh man,
about like all of that stuff. Shelley, it makes me think of your history with Chris as the team sort of started to form in 2015, 2016, which was still tasted like, vinegar in Everett's mouth, but to think of a team. But as that all started to come together, you and Chris had a past as well, right? Like you have stories before Chris Bay was a, IBCer.
Yeah, and Chris is great with dates. I'm terrible. But if I'm remembering right, I think our paths began to cross in like maybe 2012, I think, and then kind of ongoing, not about IBC, but about the kind of life enrichment thing that we both did at different times. But because of that, our paths crossed in that community. Haley has done the same thing. And we kind of got to know each other in just a casual way. And then because of that, the way our paths crossed, we had a mutual friend, and that's how we met. We met at her coffee shop, and it was a completely accidental meeting, but it was open house for her coffee shop and everybody was coming to celebrate. So Chris was there, we were there. And in Chris Bay fashion, he just started chatting with us because he loves getting to know people and he's really great at that. And he connects phenomenally well with people, unless you're Todd Forbes, my husband, because Todd always has his guard up. And Chris is like, he comes right in like with hugs, right? And Todd's like, whoa, back up. So I'm looking in, Todd's backing up. But Chris doesn't care either way because he just cares about people, but he can also read the room. So he kind of leans back from Todd, gives Todd his space, and Chris and I start talking. And before long, Todd's leaning in too, because Chris picked up on some things in our conversation about what's our why is kind of one of his famous questions. What's your why about anything? And both of us wanted something completely different in our lives than where we were headed, and he picked up on that. And one of the things I love about Chris, not just in that moment, but ongoing, and watching him with other people too, he's not a sales guy. He could not be farther from person. He just cares about people, and he loves people's lives better. However, I mean, it might be a book, it might be a movie, it might be a TV show, it might be an experience, it might be IBC, whatever it is. He just has a way of connecting dots, making connections with people and for people that are very meaningful. And he did that with Todd and me, realizing that IBC was a fantastic way for us to get to where we saw we wanted to go. So Chris is just an amazing person, like just an amazing, genuine, awesome guy who, and I agree, the way that Mike, you and Chris work together is brilliant, because I can remember when Todd and I first started coming to boot camps and listening to you, we're like, oh yeah, right on. This makes total sense. But if I were to walk away from just Mike's presentation, I'd walk away 100% knowing IBC is great. But then if Joe down the street asked me, well, what is that about? I'd just be like, and still with Chris too, but because we were able to slow down with Chris and talk about those details and ask questions in a more detailed fashion, the two of you together are just brilliant, actually. And it's been building since the start of Mike and Chris, but with a cohesive team because of the two of you have built together. So that is one of the things I appreciate with Chris so much, is he really listens well, takes the time to ask the questions and think through stuff and help to be.
That reminds me also, there's a way that he draws people out. Because what really the picture was when Todd backed up. When Todd backed up, but yet then he leaned in. And it's through Chris's warmth. It's through his care. It's through his wanting to know people's why, just like what you said. So really cool.
I think the thing that I admire most about Chris is, all the stuff that he and I did together before the team was a team. Like when I joined in 2015, I was the fish out of water. I had done sales and, I'd been in commissions and understood how that worked, but I was a fish out of water. I didn't know insurance. I didn't know any of that stuff. And Chris and I would meet at a coffee shop and just go over numbers and talk about policy design. And we would talk about the books, Nelson's books. And we would sort of just have little, think tanks, if you will, where we were just going through stuff and trying to figure this thing out, because this is well before there was a team. It was just sort of Mike was the general agent and we were the little saplings underneath it. And once everything kind of started moving forward and we became clients, obviously at that point Mary and I were already clients. The thing that I remember most about all of that is fast forward 3 years into our plan. So it's like 2018. And Chris is Mary's coach still to this day. Like if she has an IBC question, she does not ask me.
That's probably a good thing.
That's probably a good thing. But all that to be said, he came over to our house and I went down to the basement with the kiddo and just hung out, and they sat at the dining room table and were chatting. And at one point they hollered down at me and said, "Hey, meeting's over, or whatever, come on up, let's chat." And she went to check on something and he said, "I think she gets it." And I said, what? And he goes, I think the light bulb came on, because for 3 years he had been really working on like helping her get to that next level within, IBC. And, not for lack of trying. I don't think it wasn't her issues or anything. It was just those roadblocks that we've seen in ourselves and other clients. And, um, and he was just so excited. And of course he had an entire yellow pad just full of notes and scribbles and drawings. And I wish I could find the picture of that because it was hilarious. And at that time he also said, you were also right. And I said, I was right. He goes, yeah, she's got money squirreled away you don't know about. And I was like, yeah, that tracks.
Wow.
So Haley and Mike Kwong. I know, Haley, you've probably known Chris a little longer than Mike, but I'm not sure if either one of you want to kind of go into your story or backstory with Chris and the things you dislike about him most.
I'll start. I mean, I met Chris at the same time as I met, Mike and the rest of you as a client, really, right? Early on and from the podcasts and everything. And one thing that really struck with me that I loved was the fact that he has a background in education. Same with myself, right? And everything you said and is absolutely true about him taking a genuine interest in people and learning about what makes them tick or but I was impressed when I started coming on and I would shadow him, right? And of course I've watched all the boot camps, all the podcasts, and in shadowing him I see his style, right, as far as how to explain the concept, how to communicate with the student or the prospect. And I mean, we all know his pictures, right? The teeter-totter, the star, right? You all know what I'm talking about. If you've been on a boot camp, these are just iconic Chris.
They are
like elements of his teaching style. And he's the first to admit everyone has a different teaching style, and we learn about the pedagogy and all this thing, but it's just what makes sense to people, right? And me, I'm a very verbose. I love to talk about things and explain it auditorily. But he can break it down in pictures, which will always impress me because that's a whole different, level of instruction and engagement that always impressed me with him. I mean, he's obviously connected with the individual, because there's many parts to teaching, right? There's the what, there's the how, there's the why, and we already talked about that. The why, he is brilliant there, as far as like getting to know the person and knowing like what is important to you, right? What about you might benefit from IBC, right? Because the rest of us know, as a concept how great it is. But for an average person, you got to learn that. But why even learn it, right? That's the first thing. You got to know why, what your why is. Because like I've read, we've all heard, if the why is strong enough, then the what and the how won't matter. You'll get whatever you're looking for. So I was always impressed by that. And it's a gift. He's built that way. It's built different, like oil and water. Mike Everett has his, style. And then Chris with his calming, waters or whatever it is. I tell you, it's beautiful,
That's perfect.
Yeah. I think we should put on the podcast notes, I should put everybody's Colby numbers. Maybe that'll help. No, I'm joking.
Colby numbers are working geniuses.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris is going to get right in there and really figure out who you are and how you work.
Yep.
Like, oh boy, you're really going there, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Haley, what's your backstory with Mr. Bay?
I first met him at a boot camp in Lawrence. Shelly had introduced me to you guys, and I came to a boot camp and went to several more because there was free food. So you need to put those on again. And then, as Shelly had mentioned, there was a life enrichment event that I attended, and I turned around and there's Shelly and Chris Bay, and I was like, "Oh, why are you here?" So just another connection that we have as well. And then I just kind of like Chris Bay started to kind of insert myself within the business with you guys, and he was just like okay, like let's see where this is going to go. So I just had constant touch points, and then finally, uh, on April Fool's Day this past year, I don't know if it was his joke or your guys's.
That was
It a
collaborative.
joke. Yeah. Anyways, I was invited on the team, and then, really the past few months that I've been truly a part of the team, he and I have connected at even a deeper level from not only from a client perspective, but really from a personal perspective and my career as well. So he just knows how to listen, knows all the questions to ask, is very patient, very positive, a wealth of knowledge. I don't know, the list really goes on and on and on. But it's kind of circling back to like the IBC, it's his drawings and his pictures that are the absolute best.
Yeah,
when he first came up with those drawings, it was just like, oh my gosh, you talk about a full circle moment for me,
yeah.
because I can talk about IBC all day long.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, when you get those drawings,
It changes
your eyes bug out of your head and you kind of go, there's no way this really works this way.
Yeah.
There's no way. Works just like them drawings.
This one of the stories that I love to tell is a year and a half ago or so, Mike, we went up to northern Nebraska, you and I, and got caught in a blizzard on the way home.
Yeah.
And when I say northern Nebraska, it was South Dakota, basically. But
we were like 6 miles from South Dakota, up in the northwest corner.
Lord have mercy. But
yeah,
we were like, okay, we're prepping for an in-person boot camp. We had worked with the local community, found a little venue. We found people who were willing to bring some potluck foods, things like that, because we couldn't do much. Like, we had no resources up there. And the next thing we talked about was, oh, shoot, what about Bay's drawings? And I was like, we got this. We got this. And we didn't have it. It was
we were so far from having it.
It was about 38% capacity of what Bay could do. And I still have them over on the shelf here. I brought them home. And I remember at the next event, I brought mine. We still were doing live events. Or we did a live event or something, and I brought them with me. And I said, Chris, don't you worry. You don't need to draw. I've got this. And he looked at my drawings and he, in the most Chris Bay way, goes, those are pretty good. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah. You remember the hieroglyphics that we had?
Oh my!
I mean, we had. Oh my goodness! I remember looking at those when we were done, and it was just like, it kind of caught my breath a little bit, and I go, Chris would roll over right now.
We were not doing him justice. So
no.
I think one of the things that as a team that we love most about Chris, we've been joking about some of those things, like, he makes us do all these, personality tests and all that stuff. But he is one of the things that, all joking aside, if you looked at all of us on paper in many ways, yes, there are several of us that, like, out of the 6 that, work really well together because our personalities do line up for sure. But overall, if you kind of look at the 6, we joke about being misfit toys because we all have such unique personalities, skill sets, all of the things. And Chris has done just such an impeccable job of finding a way for us to learn how to communicate with one another. Not just our clients. I mean, it starts here, right? Like, as a team, we start with, like, how do we work together? Because if we can't do that, we can't help our clients succeed. And so, I think that that's something from my perspective, when I look back on the time I've been around Chris, is like, not only have I learned more about myself through all those tests that he's made us do, but and about each of you and how we can work together as a team. And it's a really powerful thing that he's been able to accomplish through the way his brain works.
Shelley, you had something you were going to add in there.
Well, I did, but Crawford just went so serious, and it's so true. Good.
We can get unserious again pretty quick.
I will in a minute, but no, I agree with that 1,000%. Crawford, he's just a really key element to build it. He's a builder for sure. He's no wonder that he has what was it? What was his original degree he was going to? Architecture.
That's right.
so drawn to architecture, and that doesn't surprise me because he's a builder. And so, but
Yeah.
he builds people, he builds teams. He's amazing at that, which I so appreciate. Not my wheelhouse for sure.
Me
But I have
either.
to go back to pictures real quick because I have a really funny aside. First of all, the idea for me to draw pictures makes me sweat. I remember when I taking over some of the meetings that Chris was doing. And before I started, I'm like, how am I going to draw these pictures? What is this going to look like? And I would just get all nervous. I just had to let it go. Like, I am not Chris Bay. I just need to be myself. Let Chris Bay be Chris Bay. And if anybody needs to go, I send people to him all the time when they need those pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I shadowed Chris for about a year in live coaching sessions with clients. And I can remember one specific session he was doing his picture thing, but it was not working well that day. He's not genius every single day. This picture of the rocket ship was really bad. And then tried to fix it. You might even have to edit this out. I'm not going to say, but the more he tried to fix it, the worse it got. And finally I was like, Chris, stop drawing that picture. we all died laughing. We're like, just stop, let it go.
Oh my gosh.
Call the 30-second timeout and move along. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh God. Well, but let's get back to something exactly what you just said, that you could say, Chris, stop. What Chris has helped create in this misfit group right here is the ability to approach each other when we have to handle something sensitive, or if we have to handle something like a client response, or how we're interacting together. Because I'll just tell you what, me, I'm a bull in a china closet. I'm busting in and we're going to get it done. Chris wants to I keep telling everybody I'm the guy who comes in the front door, but Chris is the person that comes in the garage door, like family.
Yeah. And
that to me is a really sweet picture, because I remember my growing up, all the friends and family came in the garage door. And that reminds me of Chris Bay.
Yeah.
And to that point, right? I mean, I think what we do with IBC is such a kind of thing as well, because yes, there's a sales element to it, there's an education element, but really at the foundation, it's a people, person and relationship element.
100%.
And that's where I've learned so much, from Chris, and just I can always hear him in the back, because I get excited about the concept and I'll go on and I'll forget, sometimes who I'm talking to, right? Because I'm engrossed in headspace, and I have, or they have questions, and I'm just like, oh, I just explained that, and I can always hear Chris is coaching me, like, have grace, Kwong, have grace, MK, and that always calmed me down and just, made me remember what's most important. It's not about the concept; it's the person here.
It's a people.
Yeah.
I think we all can honestly say that there are very few people in our lives that can make us laugh and then cry in the next sentence. Like, just the way he can communicate. He has such a skill with patience in language, which you've already, several of you have said. And I know that, like, one of the most uncomfortable things he does in this, for me and Everett specifically, is he'll pause for 8 seconds.
Oh.
And that dead air is so comfortable for him. But for people, and I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I know Everett and I are both like starting to, like, our leg starts to thump and our, ears start to, or head starts to twitch a little bit, and he is just so good at letting it sit and, like, letting it percolate. And it just speaks to his personality is just so even keeled. And it is such a calming effect on clients, team members, everything. And it's just he is very unique, and we're very, very fortunate to not only know him, but to get to work with him.
Oh man.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other stories that we are burning to tell?
Well, there's another component that I feel like is really important because if you're talking about Chris Bay, you can't talk about Chris Bay without thinking of his partner in crime in life, Sean Bay.
Yes.
And I know we are all so fortunate. Oh my gosh, are we not to have our our own other half that
Yeah.
keeps us where we need to be drawn back to sometimes?
Yeah.
Grounded.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think Chris is definitely the grounding one in that relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So he really needs Sean Bay to light him up sometime and get him excited. And he says that all the time. He to get happy and get excited.
Yeah.
She is a gem and absolutely brings out more of the good in Chris, which I really appreciate. It's not unusual when Chris is having a meeting with the client or any of us for Sean to pop in, and then pretty much Chris just has to give it all, takes out his earbuds, gives the device to, here you go, take over.
Yeah.
She's pretty awesome, and he's got a good one there.
Yes, absolutely.
I got a stupid story. You know, before Chris, this might have been right at the time Chris actually became my business partner. We were doing an event in St. Louis. There were 400 chiropractors at this event. And I remember I had talked to the gal who was in charge of the speakers at this event. And I remember saying, we'll give you X number of dollars if you'll give me 15 minutes on stage. And I said, I'd like to not do it during lunch hour because lunch hour, you know how distracted everybody is. So we got to do the 15-minute section after a guy had done an hour, kind of a super ultra boring continuing education deal. And so I said to Chris, Chris, here's what this is going to look like. I said, number one, I said, I'm going to have you introduce me. And then number two, 5 minutes before I'm done, I said, you need to hightail it out to the table, because I said, you're going to get inundated with people wanting to buy Nelson's book. He goes, well, how do you know? I go, Chris, trust me. So, you know, Chris, we get up there, they introduce Mike Everett and Chris Bay, and Chris, you know, does this warm, calm, just totally engaging thing. And then he introduces me, and I said, how about my business partner? And he's standing right there, you know, and he hates the spotlight on him, right?
Yeah.
I said, you know, Chris Bay and my wife their personalities are almost identical. The only difference is, I said, I don't sleep with Chris Bay. And then all of a sudden, you know, you've got 400 people in the crowd just dying laughing.
Yeah.
And then I go through my little, you know, 15-minute spiel. And I'm going to tell you what, I watched Chris Bay walk out the door right as I was finishing. We sold like 45 books in the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It was just, but I told Chris, I said, you're going to have to be ready to go because it's going to happen. And, you know, Chris, with his calm self, you know, then all of a sudden he, you know, how he wants to engage. It's just amazing because these people are now going, okay, how does this work? What's IBC? What's this thing all about? Whole life insurance.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 you know, and I can see him, you know, of course, that's me. I want to raise the temperature. Chris Bay just brings the temperature down. And it is amazing to watch Chris Bay, either one-on-one or even in a group, how he can truly grab somebody's attention, maintain it, and create this incredible communication between the two of them. Sometimes it's even nonverbal because of his personality, because of his calming nature, because of his inquisitiveness. And we are the lucky ones.
Yeah.
We are.
Absolutely.
Wondered who it would be today.
What?
I wondered who that would be today.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
You knew it was going to happen.
It was just a matter of time. We had to go long enough to make it happen,
Dadgum Chris Bay.
I know, dadgum Chris Bay.
Oh, love him.
Well, I think we've done a very fair job of telling all the things we like about Chris Bay. This would probably give him a big head, but that's okay. Every now and then he probably deserves it. Anybody else got anything else? Or okay, well, I'm not going to wait 8 seconds, but I think we all can wrap this up by saying, as Mike just said, we're lucky to have not just know him, but to be able to work with him and to have the opportunity to learn from and with him along this crazy journey that is life, success, legacy, and infinite banking concept. So to all of our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this non-roast of Chris Bay, and that if you want to check out more events and things on our website, lifesuccesslegacy.com, we have boot camps and webinars and more podcasts for you to listen to, and join us on our next podcast. Good to see y'all.